1:30 a.m. The blizzard that changed everything. The wind didn't just blow that day in late March, it attacked. Sam Holloway felt it cutting through his coat like 1,000 tiny knives as he pushed forward on his mare, squinting through sheets of white that made the world disappear. He was checking fence lines, a job that probably wasn't worth risking his life for, but out here in Montana territory, a man did what needed doing. The blizzard screamed around him like something alive and angry, and Sam was about to turn back when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind or any animal he knew. It was a child crying, thin and desperate, barely cutting through the howl of the storm. For a moment, Sam almost convinced himself it was nothing, just his mind playing tricks. But conscience has a way of being louder than common sense. He turned his mare towards the sound, leaning forward in the saddle, trying to see through the white blindness that surrounded him. What he found made his blood run cold. An overturned wagon lay half buried in the snow, its canvas torn and flapping violently in the wind. Beside it, a small boy crouched over a woman who wasn't moving. The moment the boy saw Sam, he screamed with everything he had left. "Please," he begged, his voice breaking. "Please don't leave us." Sam climbed down from his mare, his boots sinking deep into the snow, and moved toward them quickly. The woman was unconscious, her face pale as death itself, and there were no horses nearby, no supplies, no help coming from anywhere. Sam pressed his fingers to her neck and felt a pulse, faint but there. The boy was maybe 9 years old and shaking so violently his teeth were chattering like bones rattling in a box. "She won't wake up," the boy sobbed, his eyes wide with terror. "Is she dead?" "Not if I can help it, son," Sam said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He lifted the woman as gently as he could, surprised by how light she was, and carefully secured her across his saddle. Then he pulled the boy up behind her, feeling small arms lock around his waist with desperate strength. The cabin was still a mile away, but in this storm it might as well have been 10. Sam turned his mare directly into the wind and pushed forward, every step a battle. Behind him, the boy whispered prayers, his voice barely audible over the howling storm. The woman's breathing was so shallow Sam had to keep checking to make sure she was still alive. 2 more mouths to feed, he thought grimly. 6 weeks of winter left and supplies already running low. God help us all, he thought, but he didn't slow down. When they finally reached the cabin, Sam carried the woman inside and laid her on his bed, while the boy hovered beside her like a small, frightened guard. "Get back, son," Sam said gently. "Let me work." He built up the fire until it roared, then filled a tin cup with water from the kettle and added willow bark from his stores for pain and fever. He knelt beside the woman and spoke softly. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, and even through the haze of shock and cold, Sam could see intelligence in them. She took in the cabin, took in Sam's face, then looked immediately for the boy. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Is Thomas safe?" "I'm here, Grandma," the boy said, gripping her hand tight. She exhaled slowly, a sound of pure relief, then tried to sit up. Sam stopped her with a gentle hand on her shoulder.
"Your ankle's sprained, not broken, but you need rest," he said, offering her the cup. "Drink this, it'll help with the pain." She drank without question, then studied Sam with unsettling clarity, as if she could see right through him. "I'm Adelaide," she said. "This is my grandson, Thomas. We're grateful for your kindness, Mr. Holloway." "Sam Holloway," he said, suddenly aware of how small and rough his cabin must seem to her. 1 room, 1 bed, 2 chairs, and a table that had seen better years. "How long must we impose upon you, Mr. Holloway?" Adelaide asked. "Till the thaw," Sam said. "Could be 6 weeks. No one travels this country in March storms." Something passed behind Adelaide's eyes when he said that. Resignation, maybe, or calculation. "Then we're in your debt," she said quietly. "It's not debt," Sam said quickly. "It's just what's right." He pulled a pot of venison stew from the shelf and set it on the stove to warm. Thomas watched him with enormous dark eyes, solemn and hungry. Sam ladled out 3 bowls, making the portions smaller than usual, though no one commented on it. Thomas ate like he was starving, shoveling the stew into his mouth between trembling breaths. Adelaide ate sparingly, her gaze moving around the cabin and stopping on an empty cradle in the corner. She didn't ask about it. Sam was grateful for that. When the meal was done, he laid out the sleeping arrangements. Adelaide would take the bed since she was injured. Thomas would get Sam's bedroll by the fire. Sam would make do with the chair. Adelaide started to protest, but Sam raised his hand. "No arguments," he said firmly. "You're injured, and the boy needs proper rest." She nodded slowly, studying him. "You're a man of principle, Mr. Holloway." "Just a man," Sam said. Night settled heavy over the cabin. The wind rattled the shutters like it was trying to get in. Thomas murmured in his sleep, restless and dreaming of things Sam didn't want to imagine. Adelaide's eyes found Sam's across the darkness. "You've lost someone," she said quietly. "I can see it in this place." Sam looked at the fire, watching the flames dance. "Most folks out here have lost someone," he said. "My husband passed 7 years ago," Adelaide said, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. "Some winters never thaw." "Not until they must," Sam said quietly. He said nothing more, but something in his chest loosened just slightly. The fire crackled and popped. Outside, the storm raged on with no sign of stopping. Sam closed his eyes and tried not to think about how 3 people would survive on supplies meant for 1. Sam woke the next morning to the smell of real coffee, not the chicory he'd been stretching for months. Adelaide moved carefully around the stove, favoring her good ankle, as if she'd always belonged there. "Morning," she said when she saw him watching. "I hope you don't mind. I found your stores." "You should be resting," Sam said, standing up from the chair where he'd barely slept. "I've rested enough," Adelaide replied, "and idle hands don't suit me." Thomas was already awake, sitting cross-legged by the fire, staring at Sam like he was trying to solve a complicated puzzle. "Why do you live alone?" the boy asked suddenly. "Thomas," Adelaide said sharply. "Manners." "It's all right," Sam said, pouring himself coffee and buying time with a long sip. "Just the way things turned out, son." "And where's your family?" Thomas pressed. The question landed like a stone in still water. Sam's gaze drifted to the cradle in the corner, and for a moment he was back there. 3 winters ago. Clara heavy with child, her face pale with pain, the storm trapping them miles from town. The midwife couldn't reach them through the snow. Sam had done everything he could, everything he knew, but it wasn't enough. His daughter lived for 3 hours, her tiny cries getting weaker until they stopped altogether. Clara followed her by dawn, slipping away while holding his hand. He'd buried them both under the pine tree behind the cabin, and some days he still heard Clara's voice in the wind. "Mr. Holloway," Adelaide's voice cut through the memory, gentle but firm. Sam blinked, came back to the present. "Lost them a long time ago," he said, his voice rough. Thomas's face crumpled with understanding far beyond his 9 years. "My papa died too," the boy said softly. "Mama said he's watching from heaven."
Sam set down his cup, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he couldn't quite hide. "Then he's proud of how brave you are, son." Adelaide's eyes shimmered with tears she didn't let fall. "And he'd be grateful for men like you, Mr. Holloway," she said. Before Sam could respond, the wind picked up outside, a low moan that set his teeth on edge. He stepped to the door and looked out at the sky. It was dark green at the edges, the color that meant trouble. "Another storm," he called back inside. "Bigger than the first. Inside now." By noon, the blizzard was hammering the cabin like giant fists trying to break through. Sam braced the door with timber, showing Thomas how to wedge the planks tight. "Like this?" Thomas asked, pushing hard with his small hands. "Just like that," Sam said. "Good work, son." The boy beamed with pride. Adelaide watched them from beside the stove, her expression unreadable, but when Sam caught her eye, she smiled. It was sad and knowing, as if she understood something he didn't yet. The walls groaned under the force of the wind. The shutters banged so loud it sounded like gunshots. Sam wedged the last timber into place and stepped back, breathing hard. If they survived this storm, he knew his isolation was over. He couldn't unsee their need, and he couldn't ignore his own anymore. The days found their pattern after that, like stones settling in a creek bed. Unexpected, but inevitable. 3 weeks passed, and the storms eased, though winter still held the land in its iron grip. Snow piled high against the cabin walls until it nearly reached the roof. The world beyond was nothing but white silence. Inside, though, routines formed that felt almost normal. Mornings became Sam's time to teach Thomas practical skills that a boy needed to know: how to mend harness leather with an awl and wax thread, the stitches small and tight; how to split kindling with a hatchet, using short, controlled strikes that didn't waste energy; how to read animal tracks in the snow and know whether they were looking at rabbit, deer, or coyote prints. The boy absorbed everything with fierce concentration, his small hands mimicking Sam's movements with surprising accuracy. "Why do rabbits hop in circles?" Thomas asked one afternoon, frowning at tracks in the snow near the cabin. "Confuses predators," Sam explained, "makes them harder to catch." "Are people like that too?" Thomas asked. Sam paused, considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he said, "when they're scared." Thomas nodded solemnly, as if Sam had confirmed something he'd suspected all along. In the evenings, the boy read aloud from Sam's only book, a worn Bible his mother had given him decades ago. Thomas's reading was flawless, his voice clear and confident. "You've had schooling," Sam observed one night. "Mama insisted on tutors," Thomas said, then quieter, "before she died." He didn't finish the sentence. Adelaide, who was mending Sam's coat by lamplight, glanced up but said nothing. She'd proven herself invaluable in ways Sam hadn't expected. Her stitching was finer than any he'd ever seen, tiny, even stitches that made his torn sleeve look brand new. She cooked simple ingredients into proper meals, stretching their supplies with quiet efficiency that suggested years of managing a household. She never complained, never asked for special treatment, just moved through the cabin with a grace that suggested capability rather than servitude. One evening, as Thomas slept and the fire burned low, Adelaide set down her sewing.
"You never speak her name," she said softly. "Your wife." Sam's jaw tightened. He stared at the flames, unable to look at her. "May I know it?" Adelaide asked gently. The silence stretched between them like a rope pulled taut. Then, barely audible, Sam whispered, "Clara." "That's a kindness to her memory," Adelaide said, "and to yourself, speaking it." Sam nodded, unable to respond because his throat was too tight. Adelaide returned to her stitching, but something had shifted between them. A door had opened, just slightly. Later, as they prepared for bed, Adelaide paused by the stove. "We should leave soon," she said quietly. "The thaw is coming." Sam hung his coat on the peg, not looking at her. "I know," he said. "Thomas asks every day if we can stay," Adelaide continued. "He's a good boy," Sam said. "He loves you." Adelaide's voice dropped even lower. "He feels safe here." Sam turned to face her then. Adelaide met his gaze unflinching. "Do you?" Sam asked. "Feel safe?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Safer than I've felt in years." The words hung between them in the firelit cabin, heavy with meaning. Sam wanted to ask her to stay, wanted to beg if that's what it took, but fear was louder than want. "Good night, Mrs. Adelaide," he said instead. She smiled, sad around the edges. "Good night, Samuel." Spring arrived not as a victory, but as a question. Now what? Late April brought warmer days that felt like promises. Icicles dripped from the eaves in a constant rhythm. Crows returned, calling from the pines. Patches of brown earth appeared through the melting snow like secrets being revealed. Adelaide's ankle had fully healed, and she walked the property each morning, her gaze assessing everything. She studied the creek positioning, the soil richness, the natural grazing areas. One afternoon, she stopped beside Sam as he repaired a section of fence that had been damaged by the winter. "This land could be worth a great deal with proper management," she said. Sam shrugged, not looking up from his work. "It's worth my peace," he said. "And peace is worth more than gold," Adelaide observed. "To me it is," Sam replied. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "A rare man, Samuel Holloway," she said. Thomas had grown bolder over the weeks, following Sam everywhere, chattering endlessly, asking questions Sam didn't always know how to answer. "Can we stay?" Thomas asked one evening, point blank. Sam set down the harness he'd been oiling, searching for the right words. "Your family must be searching for you," he said. "They'll want you home." I don't care about them, Thomas said, his face fierce. I want to stay here with you. Sam's heart cracked clean through at those words. Thomas, you don't understand, he started. You don't want us, Thomas whispered, his eyes filling with tears. That's why you won't say yes. That's not true, Sam said quickly. Then why? The boy demanded. Because you deserve better than this, Sam said, the words bursting out before he could stop them. You deserve a real home, a real family, not some broken-down cowboy in the middle of nowhere. Thomas stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, You're not broken. You're the best man I know. Sam couldn't breathe. He couldn't speak. He just stood there frozen while Thomas walked away to his bedroll. That night Thomas had nightmares, thrashing and crying out in the darkness. Sam was at his side before Adelaide could even rise from the bed. He held the boy close, whispered reassurance into his hair, stroked his back the way he'd imagined doing for his own child. Adelaide watched from the shadows, tears streaming silently down her face in the firelight. When Thomas finally settled back into peaceful sleep, Sam looked up and met Adelaide's eyes across the small cabin. She mouthed 2 words that he felt in his chest. Thank you. The next morning, she approached Sam while Thomas slept late, exhausted from his nightmares. You're a good man, Samuel, better than you believe yourself to be. Sam shook his head, unable to accept the compliment. I'm just a man who, she interrupted, has given us more than shelter. You've given Thomas hope. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Sam asked. Faith in humanity, Adelaide said, in goodness. She paused, then continued, in the possibility of starting over.
Sam wanted to say it right then, wanted to ask them to stay, to build something together, but the words stuck in his throat like stones. Adelaide pulled a folded letter from her pocket, and Sam's heart sank at the sight of it. When we leave, I'll need to post this, she said. My family will be concerned. Sam felt his stomach drop. Family, he repeated. Wealth, position. They'll come for you, he said flatly. Yes, Adelaide confirmed. And you'll go back to your world, Sam finished. Adelaide met his eyes, and he saw something complicated there. I don't know what world I belong to anymore, Samuel, she said softly. Sam turned away before she could see the devastation on his face. A week later, Sam heard the horses before he saw them. Too many hooves for a neighborly visit, too fast for casual travel. 6 riders crested the hill, moving with purpose, and Sam's chest tightened. Fine horses, tailored coats despite the trail conditions. These weren't ordinary ranchers. Thomas, who'd been playing outside, froze when he saw them, then bolted for the cabin. Sam, he called out, his voice tight with fear. Men coming! Adelaide stepped onto the porch, and Sam saw her posture suddenly become rigid, formal. He moved beside her instinctively, protective without thinking about it. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust that hung in the still air. The lead man dismounted, a figure in his 40s with a square jaw and cold eyes that dismissed Sam entirely. Mrs. Adelaide Thornton, he said, his voice clipped and formal. Thank God, the entire territory has been searching for you. Thornton, the name hit Sam like a fist. The Thornton cattle empire, 30,000 acres, more wealth than most men could count in a lifetime. William, Adelaide said evenly, I sent word we were safe 3 weeks ago. We've been frantic, William said, though his tone suggested more annoyance than relief. His gaze finally landed on Sam, assessing and dismissive in the same glance. And this is? Samuel Holloway, Sam said, straightening. This is my land. Is it? William's smile didn't reach his eyes. How fortunate for you, sheltering my mother-in-law and nephew. Thomas had hidden behind Sam, gripping his coat with small fists. Not his grandmother's side, Sam noticed. The boy needed help, Sam said simply, so I helped. Of course, William said, pulling an envelope from his coat. Very noble. I'm prepared to compensate you generously for your trouble. I don't want your money, Sam said flatly.
William's smile thinned into something ugly. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Holloway. Name yours." "Then you don't know everyone," Sam replied. Adelaide stepped forward quickly, sensing the tension building. "William," she said, "Mr. Holloway saved our lives. We were robbed by our own escorts, left to die in the blizzard. I told him nothing about who we were because I didn't know if I could trust him." The words hit Sam like a blade sliding between his ribs. Didn't know if I could trust him. Every moment of the past week suddenly felt different, tainted. "I see," William said, his tone making clear he didn't believe a word. "Well, regardless, it's time to leave. Mother Adelaide, Thomas, we've brought a carriage." "I don't want to go," Thomas said, his voice shaking. "Thomas, enough," William snapped. "He's my friend," the boy said, his voice cracking with emotion. William grabbed Thomas's arm, not gently, and the boy winced. "Enough nonsense. We're leaving now." "Wait," Adelaide started to say.
But William was already dragging Thomas towards the horses, and the boy looked back at Sam with tears streaming down his face. Sam wanted to fight, wanted to physically stop them, but what right did he have? None. He was just a man who'd sheltered strangers. Adelaide approached him, her eyes pleading for understanding. "Samuel," she said softly, "I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I was frightened. I didn't know who to trust." "It's fine," Sam said, his voice flat and dead. "You did what you had to do." "It's not fine," she insisted. "You should go, Mrs. Thornton," Sam said, not looking at her. "Your family's waiting." Her face crumpled with pain, but she nodded and turned away. Sam watched them ride off, the horses kicking up dust that hung in the air long after they disappeared. Thomas twisted in the saddle, waving desperately. Sam didn't wave back. He couldn't make his arm move. When they were gone, he walked into his cabin, and it had never been louder in its silence. 2 weeks passed like slow torture. Spring bloomed around Sam in cruel mockery. Wildflowers appeared in the meadow, painting it with colors he couldn't appreciate. Grass turned green and lush. Birds nested in the eaves, their cheerful songs grating on his nerves. The world was coming alive all around him, and he was dying inside. Sam chopped firewood obsessively, far more than he'd ever need, just to have something to do with his hands. He let the fire go cold at night, even though the evenings were still chilly. He ate beans straight from the can, too numb to care about cooking. He was punishing himself for the sin of caring, of daring to hope for something more than the empty life he'd carved out. One afternoon, he found Thomas's carved wooden horse behind the woodpile. It must have fallen from the boy's pocket weeks ago, hidden until now. Sam stared at it, his vision blurring, and nearly threw it into the cold stove. He couldn't do it. Instead, he sank to the floor with his back against the wall, the horse clutched in his fist, and wept. They were the first tears since Clara's death, great wrenching sobs that tore out of him like something physical being ripped from his chest. When he was finally empty, hollowed out completely, he sat in the silence and heard Clara's voice. Memory or imagination, he didn't know which. "You saved them once, Sam," the voice seemed to say. "Are you brave enough to be saved yourself?" "They lied to me," Sam said to the empty room. "They were dying when you found them," the voice replied. "That was true. The rest doesn't matter." "She didn't trust me," Sam argued. "She barely knew you," the voice said gently. "Trust is earned, so earn it." Sam looked toward the empty corner where the cradle used to be. Wait, it wasn't there anymore. When had he moved it? He realized with a start that he'd put it in the shed weeks ago, sometime after Adelaide and Thomas had arrived. He hadn't even consciously noticed himself doing it. The cabin was changing around him. He was changing. "I love them," he whispered to the empty room. "Not their money or their position. Them." The words settled over him like truth finally spoken. A spring thunderstorm rolled in that evening, all thunder and lightning and rain hammering the roof. Sam stood outside in it without his coat, face turned up, letting the cold rain wash over him like baptism. He walked to the pine tree where Clara and his daughter were buried, knelt in the mud that formed around the graves. Clara,
he said aloud. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I think you sent them to me."